Kevin Hunter with Chris Morstead and Kyle Ferguson in studio. Not Kyle Ferguson. We got that straight. Kyle is referred to by Kyle Ferguson as Kyle Ferguson on one particular message we got. So that was
Kyle
fun.
Ferguson here.
Yeah, Kyle Ferguson over there. So let's get, before we get into our show topics today, we have Jody Summers online with us, who's going to be visiting about probiotics, and then we're going to go into some election updates with Jim Walsh following that. Before we do that, Kyle, hit us with the weather.
How hard do you want me to hit you? Okay, so today is going to be a high of 81 with the low of 59. It's going to rain tomorrow, so everyone get your umbrellas. It's just going to, after that though, it's going to go back straight into the 90s, and it's just going to be like that all week. That's pool weather.
Yeah, you know, you showed a couple of rain during this week, and that didn't happen. What the heck, Kyle? I had my umbrella ready and to go. And
I'm just the messenger. That's all I got. But also, you know what the cool thing is? You see this little link going across the screen? That's our Patreon. Okay, so we have a thing called Patreon, and if you like what we're doing, you can support us on Patreon. It could take $1. It could do whatever you'd like, but it's just the way we can do it. We $1
a show is $20 a month.
$20 a month, yeah. You
There
can
you
also
go.
do a one-time donation if you'd like, but with our shows now Monday through Friday, we are branching out into way more topics. We might even do afternoon shows soon, which is pretty cool and pretty exciting. So much tech stuff.
Look how much we're learning today, Chris.
I know.
So much learning. So if you like what we're doing, find us on Patreon.
All right, there you go. And something else I want to mention too, bring up our sponsor wall if you would, Kyle. Longview Auto and Tire is one of the new sponsors here on NorthWest Digital News. So special thanks to Roy and Ruben Byman, who own that business located right here in Longview on the south end of Commerce. For all your auto needs and tire needs, go by and visit those guys. You know what? There's a long time family history there. Generations of people in the family, in the Byman family, that have been working on cars for years and years and years. And these are two of the finest guys in the car repair business. And I say that as somebody who has published a lot of information about the car business itself. And when you think about like car sales, et cetera, and how many people like in that business are largely distrusted, I've shared a lot of information online to help people get through that process without getting ripped off. Well, in the car repair business, there's actually a somewhat similar kind of relationship that a lot of customers have with their so-called mechanics. And so one of the conversations I had, in fact, just yesterday with Roy Byman was, how about we create some how-to information with for people around repairs and general maintenance on vehicles so people can make better choices about their car repair stuff as well. And so they're on board with doing that. So look for that kind of content to be coming here soon. And of course, we'll share it here on NorthWest Digital News as it gets developed. Well, Kyle, let's bring up Jody Summers coming to us out of the sunny and warm, maybe warmer than us, Northern California. How's it been down there for you, Jody?
It's actually quite a nice day today. You know, there's still some smoke in the air from the fires, but it's not too windy, so that's a good thing for this time of year. And it's not super, super hot, so we're happy.
Well, we've been feeling like for the last few weeks here in Washington, we've been feeling like we've been in California.
Well,
yes.
Send out that rain. You can have all the sun you want.
Yes, it got so bad and it got so dry, the DNR even enforced a ban out on state-managed lands that people can't even go out there and target shoot because they're worried about a spark from a jacketed round off a rock or a piece of metal starting wildfires. So that's how bad it's gotten. Well, let's talk about probiotics today, Jody. This is like a really important subject for people. And unfortunately, many people know nothing about it. So share with us about the importance of probiotics, and let's talk about some of the various aspects of health in the body that it impacts.
Absolutely. So, you know, even before we talk about what it does impact, why are we hearing so much about probiotics now? And, you know, why is this new? You know, why do we hear about it all the time? And people are confused because there's lots of information, but they're not new. Back in the, you know, when my parents and my grandparents were on farms and things, they took vegetables and fermented it. They had fermented all sorts of things, which was a natural probiotic. And they also didn't have some of the things that kill the gut bacteria like we do today. So although we're hearing about it more often, it's because it's been depleted in our what we consider the standard American diet of today. But probiotics are extremely important. I mean, one of the top 3 things when I see a client, you know, we check vitamin D, whole food nutrition, and probiotics, because it's tied to 3 of the top reasons why people seek medical help. The first is, well, actually, every benefit of probiotics starts in the gut. And I read a quote just today as I was getting ready for this, that it is estimated that in the United States, we spend $1 billion, and it costs the United States $1 billion a year on digestive issues and digestive distress.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money, a lot of resources, and a lot of pain that doesn't need to happen if when the gut's healthy. So gut health is the number one thing for probiotics. The second is immune support. So 70 to 80% of our immune cells located within the gut lining and right around the area of the guts. The rest of them are in Peyer's patches and bone marrow and other places, but the vast majority, about 70 to 80%, are right within the gut walls and the large intestine.
Compromise the gut and you compromise the immune system.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we're coming up on the fall, which is cold and flu season, and when traveling, all of those things. Cancer is a failure of the immune system. So as we're seeing our gut bacteria, you know, we really do need to build up, and it's a very safe way to build up our immune system. And the third way is brain health. And with depression and anxiety, you know, really at an epidemic, our gut and is considered our second brain. And when we have healthy gut bacteria, the vagal nerve, which runs from the base of the brain down, it actually uses that nerve to send messages to the brain of either healthy messages or not so healthy messages. So those 3 things, the gut health, immune system, and a healthy brain and mental support are 3. There's lots of other reasons, but I'd say those are the 3 main ones.
You know, the issue with brain health, and it was kind of interesting. I was visiting with a couple of local business people here just the other day, and the conversation of fermented beverages came up, and they were talking about how years ago people drank a lot of fermented beverages. In fact, even the beers and ales and things like that had a lot more fermentation in them years ago and much lower levels of alcohol. And in recent years, they have figured out how to increase the alcohol and reduce the benefit that those beverages had, even as far as the gut was concerned. Mm-hmm. And with all this, and then of all the beverages now that are available in a typical convenience store or gas station or whatever, those also have moved away from a lot of these fermented beverages. I'm glad to see things like kombucha and others that are coming out now in stores and available in convenience stores. But think of all the beverages that are there. Oh, you got it right there.
There we go.
So think of all the beverages that are available in your typical convenience store, and almost none of them have any level of fermentation in them. And subsequently, people go in there, grab that as a drink, pick up a bag of Fritos or something like that, and head down the road.
Hold them up higher. They couldn't see it through my...
Yeah, hold it up a little higher.
Hold the drinks up higher because they can't see it through my shirt.
You want me to hold these up?
Oh,
sorry.
There you go.
So if you're looking for these items, this is what they look like, you guys.
Look at that. All right, so there's the point.
And
but what I wanted to mention is that with as many mental health issues, like in the one of the descriptors in the governor's budget here in the state of Washington from 2017-2019, one of the descriptors in the one sentence description of the budget talks about mental health. Just amazing how there's a connection between this, probiotics, proper gut health, and mental health.
When I have a client come to me with depression, let's say, I always ask what are their top 3 reasons, top 3 things they want to work on. And if anxiety and or depression or anything at all that has to do with brain health or mental health is on that list, they literally don't walk out the door with a good, we talk about probiotics and we work on the gut for as far as that healthy gut bacteria. There is a distinct connection between the health of our gut and the health of our brain and how we think and how we feel. There is, and every single day there's new studies. So it's just backing up the science studies literally are backing up what we've known for a long time. It's not like that science is now on the cutting edge of probiotics. Probiotics have been around forever, and they're just starting to do studies that say, this is really important. And of course they want to sell product, which you can get probiotics without having, it's in food a lot of the times. You can get some really good supplements, which are helpful. But
let's talk about that so that we don't run out of time here. Let's go into the sources, like some of the recommended sources that you have for probiotics.
Okay. So in a nutshell, there's 3 types. There's probiotics you get from food, which everybody should be taking those. Every day you should have some kind of a food-based probiotic. Then there's supplements, and there's 2 types. There's non-spore and spore-based. But let's go back to the food. So some food choices would include things like raw sauerkraut. And when I say raw, I literally mean like it says raw on the top. Okay.
Got it.
Literally not cooked. So if you go to a picnic and there's hot dogs and sauerkraut, the likelihood it comes out of a jar and it's pasteurized. Well, all of the healthy bacteria have been killed because of the heat. So raw sauerkraut, raw kimchi, raw kombucha, kefir, fermented vegetables, all of those things should somehow be incorporated at some level every single day. So food-based is one. You can make your own, like I make this. This is just ginger and carrots, and just a little tiny bit goes a long way. You don't need a plate full of sauerkraut. That's not the point. And then, of course, we talked a little bit about kombucha. And I just want to make note that these are, you can just get them at the grocery store. This one has 4 times the amount of sugar as this one does. So as you're shopping for especially kombuchas, and you want to keep a low carb diet, or you're just watching your sugars if you have blood sugar issues, always look at the sugar levels. And this is a really good one. It tastes really good. It just has very little sugar.
Kavita.
So then, I'm sorry, what?
Kavita. Kombucha.
Yeah. So those are some really good food-based. Then you can go into the store and look at the shelves and shelves and shelves of supplements. And there are some really good brands and some not so good brands. And the thing about a non-spore based supplement is that you're paying kind of a lot, and sometimes you need to keep it in the refrigerator, or they're not very active and they don't get all the way through. Oh, going back to food, you notice I didn't put yogurt on that list.
Yes.
Because yogurts usually have very few good probiotics and lots of sugar. People think of yogurt for probiotics, but I wouldn't even include it on the top 10.
For most types of yogurts that are available on retail store shelves and gas stations, things like that, it's every bit as much junk food as a Snicker bar.
Absolutely. You might as well pick the Snicker bar.
Yes. All right.
So, okay. So the non-spore base, you want to make sure that you're eating it without going into too much detail. If it's a standard everyday probiotic that you get from the health food store or the grocery store, take it at night before you go to bed, because we've talked about this before. The stomach acid changes whether there's food in there, it gets stronger, or there's not food in your stomach and it becomes less strong. And probiotics oftentimes don't make it all the way through that strong stomach acid. So the less strong that your stomach acid is, like before you go to bed, the better off, the more that are going to make it through. But if you really want a probiotic that is very potent and very powerful, look for a spore-based probiotic. And they don't come in very many strains, but anybody who's had, let's say, a round of antibiotics, I have them take a spore-based probiotic for at least 60 to 90 days to kind of re-inoculate the gut from the antibiotics. So The one I like that I wouldn't absolutely be without, I take it when I travel, is Megaspore. Unfortunately, you have to get this through a practitioner. So if you're interested in getting it, you can reach out to me. I can get it for you, or see your doctor or whatever. But this is a really good one, and it doesn't need to be refrigerated because it has a hard shell that makes it through and then goes all the way to where it should be.
All right, well, very good. We will put your link up here in the feed for anybody who wants to reach out to you and find out more information on those sources. But great information today, Jody, on probiotics. We're looking forward to having you on our Thursday health shows coming up. So for people who have been used to seeing Jody's smiley face here on our Friday broadcast, we're actually going to be doing a dedicated show to health on Thursdays. And Jody, of course, will be joining us on those shows next Thursday. For people, so that you should know, next Thursday, Jody won't be with us, but we have Dr. Mark Wheaton and Ernest Huda Jr., who will be joining us out of Minnesota, and they're going to be talking about stem cell research.
Stem cell. I'm going to tune in. It's already on my list.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic show. So thanks again, Jody, for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds good.
So for our listening audience, we're going to roll a short video here that talks about 6 signs that you might need more probiotics, just a couple of minutes long. And then right after that, Jim Walsh will be joining us here with an election update. See you in just a moment. Mute us.
Think about what they cannot see. However, inside your gut is a real living colony of bacteria. Some of these bacteria are good, and some are downright bad. Each day is a battle between the good and bad in your gut. A lot of times, unfortunately, the bad claim victory. Your immune system is compromised and your health suffers. This is where probiotics come into play. Probiotics are live bacteria and yeast that can help restore a thriving colony of good bacteria in your digestive system. They help keep your gut healthy so your immune system can fight off intruders and you can enjoy well-being. Following are 7 signs you need more probiotics. 1. You are taking or have been taking an antibiotic in the last 5 years. Sure, antibiotics can help us feel better when we are suffering from an infection. But did you know that antibiotics destroy all your good gut bacteria while killing the bad bugs that are making you sick? This leaves your digestive system out of whack. Other drugs that also rob your gut of good bacteria include birth control pills, pain medication, and anti-inflammatories. 2. You have had food poisoning. If you've had to suffer through the misery of food poisoning, you won't soon forget it. Neither will your gut. Food poisoning destroys your healthy bacteria, while the bad bacteria moves in and sets up camp. If you have never repopulated your good bacteria after food poisoning, chances are your health will suffer. 3. You have an unhappy digestive system. Perhaps your gut is always angry. You might suffer from stomach pain, constipation, diarrhea, or food intolerance. Any of these things can be a sign that you don't have enough healthy bacteria in your stomach and you need a probiotic. 4. You suffer from a skin condition. Chronic dry skin, eczema, or even just dull and listless skin can be a true sign that you do not have enough healthy bacteria in your gut. 5. You get sick often. Does it seem like you go from one cold to another and can never seem to stay well? This is a good indication that your immune system is compromised and your gut is not healthy. 6. You have a yeast overgrowth. Any kind of issue with yeast is a sign that you do not have enough good bacteria in your digestive tract. 7. You are depressed. 95% of serotonin, the happy hormone, is made in your gut. If your gut is unhappy and full of bad bacteria, you won't have enough serotonin. Once you get your gut back where it needs to be, you will find your mood improving and your outlook change. Try taking a good probiotic supplement. Some of the top food sources of probiotics include buttermilk, fermented cod liver oil, kefir, kombucha, miso, kimchi, sauerkraut, tempeh, apple cider vinegar, and yogurt.
All right, so there was your information on probiotics. Go into the links on the broadcast and reach out to Jody Summers, and you can get more information there. Well, joining us in studio is our representative, Jim Walsh. Thanks, Jim, for joining us.
Good to be here.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about some election updates. Let's start there, Jim. So things have kind of shook out. What's going on?
Yeah, we had the state primary in Washington Tuesday of this week, and Tuesday night was not a good result for conservatives around the state of Washington. There was, at least in the early stages of the returns, there was a bit of that blue wave that the progressives are talking about, and they did well in places they don't even normally do well. And our area here locally is much more kind of in play in a sort of swing district, and they did better here. What we've seen in the days since, and for the viewers who are outside of Washington, remember Washington is an all mail-in ballot state.
Right.
So everybody, you either drop your ballot into a ballot box or you put it in the mail, and it's received by the county that you live in a day or two later, and then the county does the ballot tabulations and counts. So on election night, you don't always have the final answer. The next day, next 2-3 days after election night, more ballots are coming in, more ballots are being counted. And what we've seen since, and now we're 3 days past, is a little bit of that wave has kind of crested and broken, and some of the conservatives are catching up or passing the more left-leaning candidates.
Do you have any idea how long it takes to get the ballots counted that are actually cast on the last day? Do you have any sense of when that is?
Every county's different, and in our district, our ledge district, we have 5 counties or pieces of 5 counties. So some of the counties turn it around very fast, and they'll have their counts pretty much done the day after or maybe 2 days after an election. Others take more time and can drag it out, 5, 6, even 10 days. But most get it done in that about now, in about a 3-day after the cutoff time frame. So and clearly those ballots they're counting in that 3rd day are ballots that were either dropped off on election day or night, or ballots that were put in the mail on election day, so they got the post stamp, but they weren't received by the county until the next day or 2 days later. So I would say, generally speaking, you're looking about 3 days out to start to get a pretty good, reliable idea of how a vote went here in Washington. So that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing some of the conservatives doing some catch up, and now it looks like while the conservatives and the Republican Party will generally be on the defensive in November, it won't be such a hard defense as it looked like just that first day.
Sure.
And there's no question that there's enthusiasm on the left. I mean, they are fired up, and they are determined and passionate. But that doesn't really change the numbers on how many numbers they have. But it does change how quickly they respond. I mean, they're passionate partisans get their ballots in right away. And so their ballots are counted first. They're first in the pile. But
it's interesting, even in states where they have, not the mail-in, but everybody goes into the booths. It's really quite interesting to me when you watch the election results and the returns on those, and they tend to lean Democratic in the early part of the vote and lean conservative in the late part of the vote. That's actually true all around the country. It's interesting to me that it's true of the mail-in ballot system too.
And even more so in some ways. I mean, people, and we're beginning to get to the point where people, we've had the mail-in ballots here in Washington now for several election cycles. It's relatively new. People now expect that the conservatives tend to send their ballots in later in the process. So now anybody who's been around the block a few times knows you don't take the first results you see on election night as Bible,
No.
because they're very likely to change, and change generally in a consistent direction, which is more conservative as the later ballots are counted.
I'm one of those guys, and my wife, and my extended family in this area. We're one of those people whose ballots are the last ballots to go into the system in this area. Every single election, I vote on the very last day.
Yeah.
That's election day.
Yeah.
I mean, and there are some people who feel they're not quite sure about putting it in the mail. They prefer to take it to a ballot box. I know even a few holdouts who really insist on walking their ballot into the county courthouse and handing it to a staffer.
Yeah, I ran as PCO, and I will say that you know, we have 5 votes in our house, and I was the only one that voted this year in the primary election. My other family members didn't vote. They didn't get a call from their PCO reminding them to vote, and that was done on purpose to see if the PCO was doing his job. He was not. He did not call our house. So, you know, I actually lost my race. I wasn't running to win. I was running because I was trying to make a point. And so I got extremely close. I got what you were saying about don't look at those initial numbers, because the first night I was 15 votes behind. Then the night before I was 8 votes behind, and now I'm up to like 15 votes behind again. So, I mean, it's not like I lost like a whole bunch, but I that gap could have been closed.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And that's something that makes the sort of nuts and bolts of politics in Washington more interesting. There's a lot of, you need to be getting out the vote. That is, contacting people in your precinct, people all wherever you are running, whether it's a local one or a statewide one. It makes that process much more urgent. You have to remind people to send their ballots in or drop them off. And the organizations that are good at that profit. I mean, you see the results, and the results are better turnout, and so there's sort of a burgeoning science now. Like I said, we're several cycles into the mail-in process. People are starting to figure out the right way to manage that and to keep the turnout high. We're going to end up with some very high voter turnout in this primary election, which, generally speaking, in a primary, most of the time you see maybe about a 30% turnout among registered voters in an area, because the primaries usually take place in the summer, and people are doing other things, and people who don't live politics are just not thinking about it. And you know, they think, well, I know there's an election coming up in November. I'll pay attention to that one. So you generally see about a 30% voter turnout in a primary, at least around here. And but this time numbers are up.
yeah, I think it's 40%.
More
Cowlitz
like 40%.
says 39.2 in Cowlitz.
And you actually did close the gap in Cowlitz, and you performed better this time than you did your original election. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, much better. And it's a process. I mean, you know, the district includes other counties, but in many ways, Cowlitz is the microcosm of the district.
Right.
And it's still, people are still getting used to the idea that this is not a one-party town, a one-party county anymore. And it takes time. I mean, people are conservative, small c conservative by nature, and it takes time for them to get used to the fact that this is a county that's in play, and that's not a one-party place anymore. And you know, I understand that, and we're working it. You want to kind of push that move, but you don't want to be too aggressive. You want to, you know, you have to let it happen organically, and I think it is happening organically.
The whole county is kind of changing and moving further to the conservative side, and we've seen that. We see it online and in conversations, and is, you know, and
that's a good thing.
Right.
Ultimately, I mean,
honestly, if this was such a strong Democratic hold, you would be at like 46% or 47%, and they would be at 53%. So they're kind of celebrating a little too early online. I've seen the local Democrats taking credit for the turnout, and again, they turned out people for you. So
that's fine. Listen, it's good to vote. Vote higher turnout is good, and I don't care who does it, what partisan side does it. If more people are voting, that's going to be good. Now, it might sting you in one particular election, but over time, that is a good development. And so I'm for anything that increases voter turnout.
By the way, over in Wahkiakum, 63% voter turnout.
In a primary.
In a primary, yeah.
That's like
in
a
the
general
non-presidential
election.
year, yes.
Which way did they go? Were they more conservative or more? I mean,
Well, I won that county pretty handily.
Yeah, good.
They have, as a couple of the counties in the district do, they have a couple of interesting local races in Wahkiakum, a sheriff's race that's getting a lot of attention there, and a county prosecutor race. That's all. So, the old saying, all politics is local. I think a lot of the turnout you'll see is because of some local races that are getting people interested.
Why would we care about Wahkiakum County? Our county does a lot of work back and forth between Wahkiakum and our county.
That's correct. Cowlitz and Wahkiakum share a lot of services, the administration of state services. A lot of the conservation district is shared. The labor council with organized labor is shared between the two counties. So there's a lot of political and kind of not quite political but public service organizations that share Wahkiakum and Cowlitz County together.
So just for a update then for people in your race, it'll be you and Aaron Fraser. There actually were only two in that race. Right. And that's in the 19th district. That was position 1. In position 2, looks like Joel McIntyre and Brian Blake will be the two in that one.
And that'll be an interesting race. As some of your viewers know from hearing from him before, McIntyre has been abroad. He's a Marine, a reservist, and he was called up. So he's been away for most of this cycle and been running an interesting race. I mean, he's trying to make kind of lemonade out of lemons. He's not here, so he's been doing a lot of internet campaigning and a lot of electronic media, and but it's not as good as being here. And,
right.
And we have hope that he's going to be able to get back home pretty soon from his deployment and be able to actually run on the ground in the district.
Well, for a guy who wasn't on the ground, he did well enough to advance in the election. So
he's got a
good,
solid resume for this line of work. He obviously he's a Marine reservist. His day job, his regular job, is he's a school teacher in Cathlamet in Wahkiakum County again, and it was interesting in that race, in the other race in this district, both of the Republican challengers were school teachers, and that is, I talked to some school teachers who have almost a dogmatic belief that school teachers have to be Democrats and have to be liberals. And as we well know, that's really not true. There are lots of conservative teachers and there are lots of Republican teachers.
Right.
But it was interesting that in this small snippet, in this one particular race, both of the challengers were fairly conservative Republicans and school teachers.
Very nice. Well, let's talk about some of the initiatives that are going to be on the ballot coming up this year. The ones in particular I want to focus on is 1639, the anti-gun initiative that's there. There's also 940, which is titled the anti-cop, and 1631, which is the carbon tax. Let's start with 1639.
1639 is the gun control initiative. All three of these initiatives, and in my opinion, all three are pretty bad. There's a fourth initiative coming up in November that's good, that I'm for. But really, now that the primaries are over and everyone's attention is turning to November, everyone in politics, their attention is turning to November, there's going to be a lot of focus on these initiatives. So 1639, which we've talked about a little bit before here, is a real motley piece of work. It's cobbled together 4 different bills that failed in Olympia last session. It sort of stitches them together and puts them into the form of an initiative for people to vote on. And it's backed, it's backed by people from out of state and funded by people from out of state. One of the big players in supporting the initiative is Michael Bloomberg, the former mayor of New York City, and his organization. It has some in-state support from a couple of sort of tech billionaires, and it's a strange thing, the people who are the most adamantly funding this anti-gun initiative are people who are very wealthy, travel by private plane, in many cases, as has been pointed out in the media, travel with armed bodyguards.
I was going to say, there's people around them with guns.
And they sort of are in a very royal way gonna dictate what the little people how they should live.
Yeah,
and it's one of these issues where the conventional notions of politics and money and social status are upside down.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these people who call themselves progressives are the robber barons of our time,
Mm-hmm.
and you know are the founders of companies that a lot of people think should be examined as antitrust violators.
Right.
So imagine if you went back to Teddy Roosevelt's time when the term progressive was really coined. You know, the people who call themselves progressives today were the robber barons of that time. And but our robber barons today have grabbed that term progressive and kind of use it to describe themselves. I'm a free market capitalist.
Mm-hmm.
If Michael Bloomberg wants to take some of his billions and try to influence politics here, if Tom Steyer, the hypocrite hedge fund billionaire from California, wants to take some of his billions and try to influence politics here in Washington, you know, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
Let him try. You know, you'll hear people too complain a lot about dark money, that this
Mm-hmm.
is dark money, and you know, it's not that dark. We know who the players are.
Mm-hmm.
We know what they're trying to do. We know their agendas they're pushing. We're just going to push back. And I really recommend that anybody look at this 1639. It violates one of the essential guidelines of an initiative in Washington, which is initiatives are supposed to address one issue,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
One of the key elements of our initiative process here is you're not supposed to do these, what they call them, omnibus, or these cobbled together initiatives which cover a lot of turf. Well, this violates that first principle of initiatives. It's not addressing one issue. I guess you could say it's gun control, but none of them will admit that's what it is. It's really 4 different initiatives
Mm-hmm.
pushed together. So I think there are constitutional issues with it. I think there's case law problems with it. Probably the most objectionable part to this 1639 is it includes this requirement that if you own guns, if you own firearms, you have to secure them in a certain type of gun safe. And if you don't do that, and your guns are stolen or misused, taken by somebody and used in a crime, you can be held personally liable
Mm-hmm.
for that bad use of your property. And as we've mentioned here before, I mean, imagine a law that said if someone steals your car and uses it in a bank robbery, you could be held liable because
Yes.
they stole your car and used it as the getaway car. It's just nonsense. And I think that even if this initiative gets passed in November,
Mm-hmm.
I suspect the courts, even our left-leaning courts in Washington, will toss it out because of this liability thing.
I have a question for you. What is it that makes it acceptable to voters to have all this outside money coming into our district? How is it that they're okay with it? Because if we took money that came from out of state and we ran it against something that they didn't like or something that they didn't approve of, they would be crying and complaining and saying, let's get this, foreign money out of our politics.
How
But
about
here-
Russian money?
Yeah, Russia. But
How about some Russian
here
money?
they are, and let's use your opponent for example. The amount of money that she is using out of state to influence our local elections is incredible. Why is that okay? How is it that is acceptable to them under this case? But if it was the shoe was on the other foot, they would totally crucify you over that.
Because they're hypocrites and whiners, and
Oh,
they don't apply
okay,
consistent
all right.
standards to things.
It falls under another word that we hear commonly in the news: collusion,
Look,
colluding with outside factors.
really, let them take their best shot. Seriously, this guy. I mean, most of your viewers know about Michael Bloomberg. He's pretty well known.
Mhm.
Fewer may know about this Steyer, the hedge fund guy out of California. He's a bad guy. and he's very egomaniac, egocentric. He thinks he buys TV ad time in California, where he's from, and just kind of pontificates on his TV ad, about how he thinks things should be and how the government should run and the president's a bad guy and all this stuff. He's very a megalomaniac, I think you could call him. And the idea that he's going to find little puppets here and there that he can manipulate, and I think voters have too much common sense to back that kind of thing. And who would want that? And if he wants to push, Steyer's story is he's a hedge fund guy. Okay, good on him, and he made a big pile of money. Fine, but part of how he made his money was he rolled up coal companies, and now he's out of that business now for years. But he made a lot of bank buying and selling coal companies, and now he hates coal. And he's one of the guys, of course, who doesn't want anybody to be selling coal now. Well, how ridiculous is that? Coal's fine for him to make billions on, but it's not fine, for a couple of longshoremen to be shipping, coal out of a terminal here and making, a middle class income. The guy's a hypocrite. And, it's sort of comical to me that some people get very, very sort of intimidated by this. I'm not intimidated by it at all. We're going to shine a bright light on where this money comes from. And I think that the voters are going to see that. They already see, that it's just not good. And some of them, like I said, are from inside the state. I mean, you got a couple of the Microsoft guys who are involved in this left-wing stuff. You got this guy, remember this name, Peter Goldman. This is a bad guy. This is a guy who is responsible for a lot of shutting down the state trust land,
right?
The whole marbled Merlet and a little bit of the tail end of the spotted owl era. That was this guy Goldman. And he married an heiress, so he's got a lot of money. And he's using his money now to try to influence and buy himself some left-wing legislators. And, he was, we're just going to take a look at where this money comes from. To answer your question, Chris, we're going to look at where the money comes from.
Yes, we are.
And we're going to talk about the sources of it. And we're going to talk about what it means to be, if someone chooses to be affiliated with these people.
I'm wondering if that's something that we should do on the
We
show.
should turn, we need to turn politics into NASCAR so that the people running for office are wearing all the logos across their jackets.
Supporters, right.
Yeah, that's an important thing. There's something I want to touch on real quick because you mentioned about the anti-gun agenda,
right?
Of the progressive left, and a lot of people say, that it's one thing to say make these statements and whatever, and where's the proof that there actually is a anti-gun agenda? And so, just a couple of things I want to point out. If we remember back to February when there was a school shooting in Broward County in Florida, what did CNN do following that deal? They had the CNN town hall. They brought a bunch of students there to visit about this. They invited Dana Lash. They had Sheriff Scott Israel on there, who has become a well-known anti-gun sheriff. So they had this town hall that happened around that whole thing, and out of that emerged students like David Hogg and others who were part of this anti-gun movement that was happening here in this country. Well, you would think then, if that anti-gun and all that sort of thing was actually a real solution to school violence, then you would think anytime there's a school shooting, CNN would be having a town hall, get kids involved in this thing, all that kind of stuff. There'd be the same kind of coverage, right? Because you want to create momentum behind that message if it's actually the legitimate message. So to illustrate and to prove that there's an anti-gun agenda, we shared this actually on Wednesday on this broadcast. There was a school shooting that happened May 16th in Dixon, Illinois. There was next to no conversation in mainstream media, and other than our coverage here, does anybody even know about the shooting? And the reason why they don't know is because a resource officer heard the shooting in the school, confronted the shooter head on. The shooter fled the building, ran down, tried to shoot back at the resource officer who was in hot pursuit. Resource officer takes him out. Okay? He ends up going to the hospital. The kid survives, but it's in court and whatever else. No teachers, no students are harmed on the scene. Why does CNN not go there and have a town hall? Because Dixon, Illinois proved that a good resource officer who does his job actually prevents school violence. Now let's go forward.
Well, Kevin, that's essentially important, what you said. The gun control advocates are going to couch this bad 1639 as school safety, and that's almost immoral.
Yeah.
Because they also are the ones who vote against our effort last legislative session here in Olympia in Washington to fund more school resource officers. They voted no to that, and they had their little puppets vote no to that.
So they couch something that actually works and pushing something that
doesn't work.
Yeah, is clearly so here I want to give another example. So then May 18th, 2 days later, there's a school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. And there were 10 people that died in that school shooting. One was a teacher and 9 students. There's no resource officer in this particular school. Okay, so there was nobody there to defend the kids. This kid goes in there. It ends up being police and SWAT that respond to this. One of the things that local gentleman running for sheriff here, Brad Thurman, had made a comment. He said that when seconds count, police arrive in minutes. Okay, and that is a really, really great illustration of how seconds counted in Dixon, Illinois. No loss of lives. In Santa Fe, minutes later, the police arrive. This gives this kid an opportunity to shoot 9 students and a teacher in the school. Now, all of the media flocked on Santa Fe because students and a teacher were shot. And they go into this town. You could expect a CNN town hall to happen. You could expect 24/7 and days of coverage. Do you know why that didn't happen? Because they got on the ground and they started pulling all these students, trying to get people to do the David Hogg on CNN. And every one of these students said, this kid is messed up. The shooter's the problem, not the gun. And they could not get teachers and students to feed into that anti-gun agenda, so they left town. That's why you didn't hear about casualties in a shooting in Santa Fe, Texas.
It also doesn't help that he didn't use an AR-15. He used a revolver and shotgun. And it was 10 people that got killed, and there's another 10 wounded.
Yes. So that's...
Well, listen, we have a solution to this. We have a plan, a series of bills, 3 or 4 of them, that we're going to try again to get through the legislature come January, that will take real practical steps to make our schools more secure. And the key element of that series of bills is to fully fund our school resource officers. That is armed, uniformed security on and around the school campus. The good guy or good gal with a gun. And the fact that the progressives will not support funding this program, which is already on the books. We don't need to create the program. We just need to put the money into it. It just speaks volumes to me. It's the old Rahm Emanuel thing. Never let a crisis go to waste. It's like they're trying to create a crisis that they can use as the excuse to put gun control into effect. And I don't think the people of Washington are going to fall for it, because they know, the voters know, that we have good, practical, proven public policy for making our schools more secure. And broad strokes gun grabbing is not going to make the schools more secure.
Right.
And so when November comes, when we get toward the fall, and you start hearing the publicity machines gear up on these initiatives, remember that they're going to claim that this gun control bill will make schools more secure, and that isn't true. More security at the school will make schools more secure. Better design of the schools will make schools more secure.
What makes courtrooms secure? What makes airports secure? You can just go around and ask, what makes the Emmy Awards secure? What made the Golden Globes secure? You've never heard of anybody ever being shot in these locations. What makes them secure?
Armed guards.
Strong perimeter.
Secured point of entry, strong perimeter, and armed people.
And
good guys with guns on the inside. Yeah, exactly.
So, and they'll try to make political hay out of this. Oh, Walsh and the conservatives, they want to make our schools into prisons. That's not the plan at all. The school resource officers are really an integrated part of the school. They're They become like part of the faculty. They integrate with the kids. They know kids. It's very personal. It's not like a prison guard. And the SEPTED design that we want to see put into place is very smartly done, technology based, and it controls perimeter, it controls access, but it doesn't do it in a way that looks like a prison. So those kind of cheap shots, we'll deal with those.
Well, that's nonsense, because is our state capital, Olympia, is that a prison?
No,
not at all.
Nice place.
There's armed security there. Is the airport a prison? Has anybody ever gone to an airport and go, I feel like I'm in jail here because there's security? Baloney. Nonsense. There's none of these secured venues in which people walk into every single day and feel like they're in a prison. That's nonsense.
Now, I graduated in 2017 from high school, and we had a school resource officer, and every kid loved him. He was an active part in the school. Like, he was basically just a teacher. He loved kids. The kids loved him. It was really cool. It was really great just to see him actively be in the school and partake in the fun and everything. He wasn't just like, oh no, stay away from him, he has a gun. No, he was like, man, he's so cool, I want to talk to him. Every kid loved him. And that's how it is. It's not like, oh no, prison.
But the important part too, Kyle, is that is a kind of deterrence to someone who wants to hurt other students, to know that resource officer is there, and to know that he's a good guy, that he's, and that the other kids will tell him, will come to him if there's trouble afoot. That is a deterrent that helps, we hope, that resource officer never have to unholster his weapon. Because the very fact that he or she, some are women, is there on the campus and part of the campus community is a effective deterrent, oftentimes, to kids who are going to, go out in a blaze of glory and take people down. Now we still have to address that go out in the blaze of glory part. We still have to do more about the mental health issues that affect this violence. But there's nothing better, in my opinion, than having that school resource officer there, just as Kyle describes.
All right, so we don't run out of time. Let's move on to Initiative 940, the anti-cop. Chris, you have a question on that. Let's hit it quick.
There's this story that's been surfacing over the last couple of days. I haven't read it. I don't know anything about it. Maybe you could give us your opinion on it another time. But let me tell you, apparently a Muslim gentleman in New Mexico was running a training ground for children to perform school shootings. Documentation, everything like that.
Training camp, yes.
It's right here so that you can see it. It's by too many news sources for it to be fake news. Fox is reporting it. CNN is reporting it. NBC is reporting it. We need to figure out what's going on with this and get this out there, because that's some pretty evil stuff right there, you guys. And again, the only reason for somebody to do that is to further the gun restriction legislation and to train these kids to go into school. So maybe on a future show you could come back and address that for us, because this is really, really, really preliminary.
Kyle, find one of those links and throw it up on the screen for our viewers.
I also have a comment from Kevin Klein. Jim is on fire with explaining how school resource officers are not like corrections officers. Their jobs are different. They're the goal different. So
it's true.
Thanks, Kevin, for that comment. Kyle, you need to put up.
Story, Chris. I don't know much about
to
it.
Kevin Klein's point, you need to put the thing because Kevin said so.
How serious they are about disarming our citizens.
That's for Mr. Klein.
But
all right. So let's talk about Initiative 940, the anti-cop initiative.
Yeah, this is another bad one. This is the one, and we've talked a little bit about it before. This is the one where, in the last legislative session, this was an initiative to the legislature, a kind of cousin to the initiatives that go straight to the voters. And it comes first to the legislator in this case, and then out to the public. And when it came to the legislature, there was this attempt. It's a bad bill. What it does, it does a couple of things that are bad. The main thing it does is it makes it a lot easier for a law enforcement officer to be held personally liable for a shooting or other kind of violence that happens while on the job. Now, under current law, a cop who's involved in a bad shooting can be prosecuted. That can be held personally liable.
Sure.
So that's already there. But there is a fairly high standard that an accuser or a prosecutor has to meet to show that that cop acted badly, with actual malice is one of the legal terms to it. And in my opinion, that's a good thing. We want to be able to prosecute really bad cops who break the law. But we want to give a good cop, you know, what they call qualified immunity.
Mm-hmm.
That is, the police department will protect that cop in a limited way
Mm-hmm.
from the ability of people to prosecute him or sue him personally in the event of a shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this I-940 kind of changes the existing setup there, and it makes the standard, that actual malice standard, much lower.
Mm-hmm.
So that a person, whether an individual suing the police officer or a prosecutor looking to prosecute the police officer, could much more easily say, this shooting is no good. And they wouldn't have to show actual malice on the part of the officer. It's a lower standard. To me, that's troubling. I want to see more good people getting into law enforcement. I don't want to see fewer. And I don't want to see good people being pressed out of law enforcement as a career because they can be personally bankrupted by a shooting.
Right. But when you have legislation like this,
Okay, good.
But when you have legislation like this and these new guys that are coming up that want to be police officers, this has got to be discouraging to them to actually go into police work.
That's what I was going to say. That this can't do much for recruitment.
Right.
No,
I mean, this is
terrible
terrible. I mean, why would we want to hinder our police department? I understand that some people think that they're evil and that they're out to get everybody. But for the most part, I have found that the police officers that are on the street are very helpful, and they care about their communities and their jobs. They aren't out there to see who they can shoot or who they can't shoot. In fact, they don't want to shoot anybody. But, you know, stuff happens and they're forced to. But how are we going to get good police officers if these guys are so afraid to even, I mean, this is going to be, I wouldn't want to be a police officer after this.
No, there'd have to be some kind of special insurance, or, I mean, it just starts a liability cycle that we're seeing in some medical care, where doctors are being essentially pressed out of their specialties because the malpractice insurance has become so expensive.
Check email.
And so I am opposed to this 940. In the last legislative session, there was this sort of clever attempt to modify this.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this a little before, where this amendment to 940 actually was voted on before 940 was by the legislature. And so we voted on the amendment first, because nobody trusted each other about 940, and then voted on 940, and both of them unfortunately passed. I was a no vote on both of those pieces because it just seemed like it violated common sense to me why you would have an amendment you'd vote on before the thing that it amends.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, even though they both passed, and people who voted yes for them will have to answer to voters for that, the first court that looked at it said you can't do an amendment before you do the underlying, and they tossed the amendment out. So we don't have the amendment that made 940 a little less bad. Now we just have 940, and it's a mess of an initiative.
There's something I want to share for our viewers real quick. Go to the top of the screen here on this site. This is a site called De-Escalate Washington, deescalatewa.org. And of course, this is a site that's attempting to say that they're reducing violence by pushing this initiative 940. But there is something else that I want to point out about this. I think the push of these people on this site is wrong. I think they're wrong with their idea that this actually reduces violence in the community. But go down to the bottom, if you would, Kyle, where it says De-Escalate Washington Leadership Team. And you notice all this list of people that are here. I just want to point that out for a few people locally who think websites are a way to get information out to people. It's very cowardly when your names and your associations are not listed on the bottom of the website. So that's the point I wanted to make with this. At least these people, although they're all wrong, are listed here, and they're taking credit. There's also a contact email there for them too.
Why is SCIU even have a dog in this fight?
I don't know.
I mean, that's my union right there, 775. I can't possibly imagine why.
All right, you can wipe it off the screen.
It is not an initiative that's friendly to government workers. I mean, law enforcement are government employees. It's not friendly to them in any way. And it's I don't like throwing the term radical around, but the agenda behind I-940 is an anti-cop, anti-law enforcement agenda that is radical. There's no other way to say it. And I just think we got to help the law enforcement. We got to support law enforcement. And when there's a bad actor, we got to identify them and prosecute them. But we don't want to lower these standards and assume that all law enforcement are bad actors. It's not true.
Correct.
And truth is important here.
We want to tie up just a couple things here before we run out of time. Kyle, if you would, throw this title up here. Man arrested at extremist Muslim New Mexico compound was training kids to commit school shootings. So there it is. That's to the point of the story that you were talking about earlier today. So we'll have more conversation about that story here in a upcoming show. I want to, before we're done here today, Jim, let's talk about Initiative 1631, the carbon tax.
Yes. Oh, and they're not calling it a carbon tax now, Kevin. You've made a green sin. No, they're calling it a pollution fee. It's really the carbon tax.
It's the carbon tax.
And what it does is there's one piece of this movement. It's a pet project of Governor Inslee, of course. He wants to put this carbon tax into effect, and he's failed, and he's failed, and he's failed, and he keeps looking for new kind of tricky ways to slide it in. And 1631 is the latest tricky effort to slide it in. What this is, of course, is it's an attempt to what they call price carbon. So make some system for figuring out pollution and how to price pollution. Now, if that were all it was, you might get some bipartisan support, because there's nothing wrong with trying to figure out a way to price a complicated thing like pollution. But this, of course, goes way beyond that. And it doesn't just price carbon. It creates a system of what they call Pigovian taxes, economics term, and basically taxes designed to discourage certain kinds of behavior. And in this case, to driving a car or running a factory that makes things.
Drinking soda in Seattle.
and really, I mean, even the supporters have gotten a little bit honest here, and they admit that the practical effect of this 1631 will be higher gas taxes. That's really what it boils down to. And they're admitting that it will add 15 to 30 cents a gallon to the price of a gallon of gas here in Washington. And if they're admitting 15 to 30, my guess is the effect will start at 30 and work up from there. But they even admit that's what it'll do. And I just think that this is not necessary. We already have some of the highest gasoline taxes in the country in the state. So if you want the Pigovian effect of discouraging people from driving, you've already got it here. The other thing to point out about this is, in the spending side of what the state will do with the money that it would collect from this higher gasoline tax, it doesn't do anything to clean the pollution. It doesn't do anything for the environment.
Yeah.
The money goes into the general fund. So it can be used for whatever harebrained scheme the Speaker of the House and his cronies come up with for, homeless housing or whatever kind of benefits they want to do. It doesn't have to go to doing anything to clean up the environment. So it's a loser on a couple of fronts for me. Mostly, we are plenty taxed on gas tax already here. And another thing I want to point out, whenever you hear these new tax schemes coming up, remember this: the best way to increase tax revenue to the state government is to grow the economy, is to increase assessed property values. Grow the economy. That's the way that you can create more revenue for the government. And in the last few years, we've been outpacing our projections just from existing tax channels in this state. So we're collecting plenty of tax. We don't need to increase taxes, make new ones, and try to create new pipelines of money into Olympia. We're doing fine there. Our problems in Olympia is on that spending side, like I said about this gas tax, where it doesn't go to any specific purpose to clean things up. It just goes into the dark hole. And we don't need any more of that. We need to put some light in that dark hole and figure out how we're spending the money we're spending now before we create a lot more tax burden on people who are driving 40, 50, 100 miles a day. And so I'm opposed to this initiative, and I'll be talking more about it as we get closer to November.
You know, I always think it's funny when it serves somebody's agenda, when they point out this, why is big oil spending millions to fight against clean air, good jobs, and better health. I always think it's funny when they like and capture, pull these other issues that are completely disconnected even from what they're trying to do. And not that, as you just pointed out, Initiative 1631 does not create better health in this state and does not create clean air in this state, and certainly does not create good jobs in this state.
No, it kills good jobs.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't do any of those things.
Very misleading, that rhetoric.
Yeah, so why don't I just rephrase this and say, why is big oil spending millions to fight against, families, against church organizations, against water for ducks in the lakes, and all kinds of other things we could pull into this thing? Because if they're just going to use these kinds of things that have nothing to do with what 1631 is, well, why don't we just create a list of unassociated things?
I'm just perplexed and burned out by the whole thing. I don't understand this idea of the legislature raising minimum wage and other things like that just to turn around and take it from us. I mean, it's getting old. It's like they say we're going to give you more money just so that they can take it.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, like you said, we're one of the highest taxed in the nation on gas. Where do they think citizens are going to get all this money with all of our utilities going up and all of this just junk that is reaching further into our pockets? We only have so much money, you guys.
The other thing that this affects, if 1631 was approved, if it was voted through, the other thing that this does affect is watch your landfill rates as well go up.
Well, I mean,
everything's going to get spendier.
Now, again, speaking locally for landfill and this rule right here, if this happens, our county's in big trouble.
It is.
We
in
won't
very
be
big
able
trouble
to deal with what happens. However, I know some people that could deal with it, but that's another show.
That's another show. Go ahead, Jim.
Chris, to your point, I think some of the proponents of this initiative and other carbon tax type deals that they've run, they don't want people living in rural Washington. They want to depopulate rural Washington and concentrate people living in urban corridors. And some of them are cagey about it, but some will come out and admit that's what they want. And this gets into some really kind of troubling central planning type land.
Tinfoil hats out.
I know, it's that kind of thing. You're right.
It's hard to believe it, but I guess there are people that are actually pushing that. Listen, I don't want to live in a city. I'm feeling a little crunched where I'm at now, and I want to be further away from people. And there's a lot of people out there like me that don't want to be crammed in the city or live in this urban stuff. I mean, we just don't want to.
I got you that tinfoil hat.
Yeah, tinfoil hat. We're talking Agenda 21 now, you guys. But no, it just cracks me up.
All right. Well, gentlemen, we are out of time. Thanks to all of our viewers that joined us here on Northwest Digital News today. We'll be back with on Monday with a return of our programming, and next week. This week, if you noticed, we had shows on 4 of the 5 days coming this next week. Shows all 5 days on Northwest Digital News, and you will see a Monday through Friday programming starting here next week. And
you'll see something from us, not necessarily all of us, but we will have some type of show.
That is correct.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
I just want to give a shout out to Ice Swallow and JJSBB for the new follow.
All right. I appreciate the abbreviated description of those, Kyle. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us here on Northwest Digital News. Special thanks to Jim Walsh for joining us here on the broadcast. Thanks to Jody Summers for her contributions early in the show on probiotics. On behalf of myself, Kevin Hunter, Chris Bornstead, Kyle Torgerson, thanks for joining us here on Northwest Digital News. Till next time, take care.